What if the secret to understanding modes isn't in the scale you play, but the chords you choose to play underneath the scale? Most guitarists think mastering the modes is all about scales. Well, here's the thing, right? Without the right chords underneath these scales, you're not going to sound modal at all. So in this video, I'm going to show you what exactly makes a chord progression sound modal, and how we can apply this to the instrument, giving us a great foundation to start playing and improvising modal solos. If you don't know who I am, I help intermediate guitarists become more advanced on the instrument. If you want to progress your playing as much as possible, I recommend you join the school community. There is a link to join in the description. We host weekly workshops where we go more in depth into the videos I release on this YouTube channel each week. So again, if you want to progress your playing as much as possible, join the community below. It's completely free to join. To fully understand and apply everything we're going to cover today, we first need to break down where modes come from and what gives them their unique sound. So you probably already know that modes are created by just shifting the starting point of our major scale. But their distinct character comes from something a bit deeper than just moving around the major scale, right? The specific intervals within each mode create the modal sound. So for example, the major scale, which is Ionian, what makes it sound like the Ionian mode is the intervals that create it. So the intervals that create the Ionian mode are just a root, a major second, major third, perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, a major sixth, and a major seventh, and then we go back to the root again, right? So the things that make it sound modal are the intervals that build up the scale. So we're going to dive a bit deeper into that later in the video. Understanding how these intervals shift in other modes is key to unlocking their modal potential, right? So again, we're going to dive deeper into this in a minute. It's also important to note that each mode corresponds with one of the diatonic chords that we can create from our major scale as well. So the 1 chord is going to align with the Ionian mode, the 2 chord is going to align with the Dorian mode, 3 chord is going to be Phrygian, the 4 chord is going to be Lydian, 5 is going to be Mixolydian, 6 is going to be Aeolian, and 7 is going to be the Locrian mode. Again, recognizing this is an essential connection that we need to understand in order to build these modal sounding chord progressions. So modes. They're a lot like flavors in a recipe. Some are going to sound quite sweet, some are going to be quite spicy, and the right chords that we choose to add to this recipe are going to bring out the unique flavor or taste of a mode. And just like cooking a great meal, creating a modal chord progression doesn't have to be complicated. It's going to sound more modal the less chords we use, the less ingredients that we use to overcomplicate this meal, the more our chord progression is going to sound modal. All it takes is just picking 2 or 3 chords from your diatonic key and centering them around the mode rather than the 1 chord of your key. So again, this is why it's important to understand the relationships between the modal scales and the chords that create your key signature. So you want to be able to center everything around the chord that corresponds with your mode rather than just the 1 chord in your key. So for example, if you wanted to play in the Lydian mode, you want to center everything around the 4 chord of your key. That's going to be your new home base that you resolve everything to, rather than always going back to the 1 chord. For example, let's say we want to create a modal chord progression in B Mixolydian. It means we're going to have to focus on the chord B major as our key center. So to find the other chords that we can use, we've got to look at the major scale that B Mixolydian comes from. Now again, the 5th chord, the 5th major chord in the key of E major is B. So that's where the B Mixolydian mode comes from. So that means to find the rest of the chords that we can use around B Mixolydian, we've got to look at the chords that are created from E major. So all the chords that are available in E major we can use, but we revolve everything from the point of B instead of E. So a simple progression in B Mixolydian, we could do something like going from B major to A major. Notice that the fewer chords that we use, the stronger the flavor of the mode becomes. Now, there's a good reason for this, right? The distinct sound of a mode comes from the unique intervals that we find inside the mode. So if you've seen my other videos on modes, you'll know that every mode is essentially a variation of either a minor pentatonic or a major pentatonic with just 2 extra notes. So again, if you don't really understand this, I recommend you check out the video that I've made on the modes and pentatonic scales. It's really easy to see the connection once you understand how to turn a pentatonic scale into a mode. Again, check out this video over here. It's going to be quite useful for understanding this video and also learning how to improvise with the modes as well. But the key to making your progression sound modal is the extra notes that we add in on top of the pentatonic scale and then emphasizing those 2 notes, right? So let's break this down for B mixolydian. To turn B major pentatonic into B mixolydian, we have to add 2 extra notes into this scale. So instead of just being 5 notes, we make it 7 notes. Right? So the 2 extra notes that we add in are this perfect 4th and this minor 7th over here. So the 2 unique notes that make it sound mixolydian are that perfect 4th and minor 7th. Now, if we look at the names of these notes, we get something cool when we realize how it relates to this new chord that we've added in from B, right? So the name of the perfect 4th, this is the note E, right? And the name of the note for the minor 7th, this is the note A. So in B mixolydian, the perfect 4th is E and the minor 7th is A. Okay, where am I going with this, right? Let's look at this A major chord. We go from B major to A major, right? Let's break down the notes that are inside this A major chord. Well, would you look at this? We have the note A here. We've got this note, and then we've got E over here. So the perfect 4th and the minor 7th of B mixolydian is included inside this A major chord. This is why it makes everything sound mixolydian. This is why it sounds like a mixolydian modal progression. It's because when we go over to A major, we're still playing that minor 7th and that perfect 4th of the B mixolydian mode. So to find these chords that are going to make your progression sound modal, you want to find chords that include those characteristic intervals of your mode. So when you're building your own chord progressions, again, focus on finding the notes that have a minor 7 or a perfect 4th for mixolydian. Again, these intervals are going to be different for different modes. For mixolydian, it's going to be the perfect 4th and the minor 7th. But that's the secret to unlocking the true sound of your modes and creating modal chord progressions. You want to play the chord that your mode corresponds from, and then the extra chords that you add in around it need to contain those unique modal intervals. And again, you don't want to overcomplicate this. Keep it simple. Only use like 2 or 3 chords, and you're going to get yourself a really nice sounding modal chord progression. So by now, we've learnt that the secret to a flavorful and tasty modal chord progression lies in using fewer chords and ensuring that the chords that we do use contain the unique intervals of each mode. But what if I told you there's a way to enhance the flavor even more, right? And that's by using slash chords in our modal chord progressions. It's much like just like adding special secret sauce over the top of a meal suddenly makes everything taste so much better. When we add these slash chords in, we can kind of glue that modal sound all in one place. So you might be thinking like, what are slash chords? You might actually not know what they are. They're actually quite simple. So it's basically when you take a triad and instead of playing like the regular bass note, you just move the bass note around and keep the triad the same. So instead of just playing like this G major triad like this, I could play like the bass note A over this G major triad. I could play like the bass note C. And that essentially is what a slash chord is. It's when we change the regular bass note and make it a different one. So now imagine pairing all the diatonic triads from your mode's parent scale with the bass note of the mode itself. Alright, so to demonstrate this, let's take A Dorian as an example. A Dorian comes from the key of G major. It's the second chord in the key of G major, so it's the second mode that comes from G major. So we can use all the diatonic triads from G major, but instead of sticking their usual bass notes on, what if we made the bass notes always the note A, which comes from A Dorian? So we can go like... That's going to glue everything together and make it instantly sound a lot more modal. This creates a strong Dorian type of flavor, since A always remains the tonal center. It's always present inside all of these triads. Now again, we can refine this even more. So instead of using all of the diatonic triads just randomly, we can focus on those that contain the unique modal notes of Dorian. Now for Dorian, the unique modal intervals are going to be the major second and the major sixth, right? So in A Dorian, the major second is the note B, and the major sixth is the note F sharp. So here's how this works with finding triads that we can play to use slash chords, right? So start with just this A minor triad as your foundation. It's your new home base, it's your new tonal center. So now we're going to move to a different triad that highlights a unique modal note, right? So again, we know the unique modal notes for A Dorian are going to be this major second and this major sixth over here. So what if we move to a triad that has that major sixth in there, that has the F sharp note? So we can play this like diminished triad over here. It's got the major sixth in it right here. Pair that with the A bass note, and we highlight that sound of Dorian by moving to this new triad. So we can go from like, just move to that and include that major sixth in there. We're going to highlight that sound of Dorian, creating a more Dorian sounding modal chord progression. Now again, we also know that we have another unique modal note. That's going to be the major second. That's going to be the note B, right? So what if we moved from the major sixth to a chord that has that major second in it, right? So we could do that by playing this kind of like C major 7 chord over here, right? The reason this works, this note, this highest pitch over here right at the top, this is the note B. That's that major second right at the top there. And again, when we play this with the A bass note over the top, we're further highlighting that sound of Dorian, because again, we've got A, our tonal center, and we have that major second included in there as well. So like when we go between everything, we get like a really nice Dorian sounding chord progression when we go like... So when we look at all the chords we're playing in this progression, at all times we're grounded around the intervals that make Dorian sound unique. There is not a single moment when I play all of these chords when we're not either playing a root note, a major sixth, or a major second. Again, all of those intervals are the intervals that make that mode Dorian sound unique. So the A bass note is always drowning throughout. Again, this creates the unmistakably distinct kind of Dorian sound when we glue and ground everything around that point of A in the key of G major, right? This strong modal identity makes it incredibly easy to improvise over the top of A Dorian inside this progression, right? So by strategically using these slash chords, when we pair that bass note that's from the mode, you're creating a rich, like unmistakably like modal type of soundscape. Again, all we have to do, just keep that bass note going and find the intervals that make it sound like Dorian. Imagine that your solo, the improvisation, is the dessert that comes at the end. Once you've crafted the perfect chord progression, it's time to add like just the finishing touches to make your improvisation sound that much more impressive. So to make it truly shine, all you need to do is focus on highlighting the unique intervals of your mode. If you're not sure on how to do that, again, don't worry, I've got you covered. Check out this video over here. It's where I break down how to play the modes using the scale shapes we're already familiar with. So we can play the modes just using the pentatonic scales that we already know about. So when you combine that with the chord progressions that we've learned how to play inside this video, you're well on your way to mastering those modal sounds.